As we all know, knowledge is the power and science is a tool for gaining it. But also in the parallel, the products of science are often used for non-scientific purposes or even for conflicts, domination, and destruction. So scientists have a powerful voice in society, although it's diminishing. And the question is, the decision makers, are they listening to it? In this session, we will explore how science, modern technology, and scientists can be used as a force of good and help diminish conflicts. We have four panelists, and the first one is Boris Kožnjak from the Institute for Philosophy of Zagreb, and the title of his presentation is War and Peace, What Can Scientists Do? Boris Kožnjak is a philosopher of science, as I said, at the Institute of Philosophy of Zagreb, and his main area of specialization is philosophy of science, with a strong interest in interrogation with other meta-sciences like history, sociology, and psychology of science. So, Boris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Zvonimir. As you heard, the title of my small talk is War and Peace. What can scientists do? But first, let me say that I'm not speaking as a scientist, at least not as a practicing scientist, although my primary education is in science, specifically in physics. As Zvonimir also mentioned, I will speak as a physicist turned historian and philosopher of science. So I hope that in this sense, I am justified in speaking on behalf of scientists. In addition, I come from a professional field in Croatia founded by Professor Ivan Supek, a physicist, philosopher, and humanist, as well as one of the prominent members of the Pugwash movement from its earliest years. In trying to answer the question, what can scientists do? I will frame the proposed answers as a threefold return to basics. The first is promoting social responsibility of science. This simply means that scientists should stop feeding war efforts and conflicts. Unfortunately, we must acknowledge that there are many scientists who treat science merely as business as usual. Moreover, and deeply sadly, the numbers indicate a relentless rise in the funding of scientific and technological research for militaristic ends, the increasing weaponization of science and technology with devastating effects. Nevertheless, there have fortunately been significant peace movements led by scientists, particularly aimed at reducing or ending their involvement in the military-industrial complex. These movements often stem from moral and ethical concerns about the role of science and technology in enabling warfare. We should not dwell too much on this point, as we already have significant and influential role models. The Russell-Einstein Manifesto of 1955, issued by Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein and other prominent scientists, clearly and strongly called for the abolition of war. It urged scientists to recognize their responsibility in preventing global annihilation and advocated for the peaceful use of science. The Pugwash conferences on science and world affairs, inspired by the Russell-Einstein Manifesto, have brought and continue to bring together scientists and policymakers, including the Croatian Pugwash, to discuss disarmament and global security issues. Pugwash seeks to eliminate the misuse of scientific knowledge in warfare and to promote dialogue on peace and ethics. Most importantly, what stands out in the recognition that scientific knowledge comes with ethical obligations. It comes with ethical obligations. Scientists must anticipate the societal impact of their discoveries and ensure their work promotes the common good. Peace is not merely the absence of war, but a condition that requires the active cultivation of justice and cooperation. So, the military misuse of science is simply fundamentally opposed to these goals. In other words, scientists should not be part of the problem, but part of the solution. The second advice would be loud and firm voice against warfare. Promoting peace is essential, of course, but it is equally important for scientists to raise loud and firm voices against specific instances of warfare, wherever and whenever needed. These voices are not necessarily futile and sterile. The example of our country, Croatia, which underwent a terrible aggression in the early 1990s, can serve as a good example. The end of August 1991 saw the beginning of the battle for Pugwash, which lasted for 3 whole months. It was the bloodiest battle of the Croatian homeland war, which took more than 3,000 lives. While international politicians calmly observed our tragedy with no solutions, the most prominent scientists in the world raised loud and firm voice against the aggression. In the following months, a total of 124 Nobel Prize winners signed an appeal for peace in Croatia. The appeal influenced public opinion in Western countries, mobilizing civil society, advocacy groups, and governments to provide humanitarian aid and support to Croatia. It helped combat narratives that downplay the severity of the conflict or mischaracterized it as a purely internal matter. While the appeal was officially neutral and focused on peace, its recognition of the violence perpetrated by aggressor forces indirectly supported Croatia's right to self-determination and resistance against aggression. The impact of the appeal was thus significant and far-reaching. Therefore, from this and other historical examples, we can learn that while it is essential for scientists to continually promote peace, it is also important to speak up against concrete violence, aggression, and warfare wherever and whenever needed. And finally, I will be very brief in my talk. The final advice, but I think the most important advice would be for working scientists and all of us is back to the roots. That is trust in science. The fundamental condition for the authenticity and success of every action is trust. Trust is equally a prerequisite for science as it is for every step of our daily lives, which would become an impossible mission without basic trust in other people and in society as a whole. This trust, however, is not merely blind belief. It is built through reason and experience. Moreover, in the case of science, trust is everything. Speaking as a historian of science now, the famous scientific revolution of the 17th century did not lie in a particularly new method of arriving at truth, but rather in building trust in those who advocated and practiced it. Trust in their good intentions, honesty, and reliability. In fact, science relies so heavily on trust that we cannot truly understand the production of scientific truth without understanding how trust is established, maintained, weakened, or lost. However, trust, both among scientists themselves and in scientists by the public, is not merely a matter of expertise. To be an expert, even of the highest rank, does not necessarily mean being a trustworthy scientist, especially in the eyes of the public. This is something that is easily overlooked when faced with anti-scientific tendencies, where science itself is sometimes part of the problem of anti-science rather than its solution. In conclusion, scientific authority and integrity might be necessary condition for scientists to take wider actions, including peace initiatives, but it is their moral and ethical authority and integrity that can bring these actions to life. To achieve such standing, trust is essential, and being trustworthy ultimately depends on what we think science actually is or should be. Thank you.